Hello folks. Well, don't we have some beautiful outdoor surroundings this afternoon? If you're familiar with the coverage project by now, you know the drill. I'm not telling you a thing about where we are right now because this is outside of a big trip. I will give a hint though. Across this body of water, that's not America. But anyway, if you're seeing this right now, trip number 7 has ended. Our Southeast tour was a long experience. I think it was our longest tour to date, and it sure was eventful. Jam-packed with several different states new to us here on the coverage project, revisiting different parts of a few familiar states, but all in all, getting that true Southern perspective. As I usually say, if this is your first video of the coverage project that you're watching right now, or you have no idea what I'm talking about with this southeastern tour, well, welcome to epilogue number 7. After every major trip here on the coverage project, I like to take it easy and go to a sheltered, secluded place away from the places I go to at the following trip to do a little bit of reflection on my own personal self and about the things that you may not have seen on camera about the prior trip. So, if you are unfamiliar with the events largely that happened during this southeastern tour, please pause the video, go to all the other videos that have been uploaded before this one, and watch a good amount so you're familiar and up to date with the coverage project adventures. Now, given the terrain on which I'm supposed to walk throughout the duration of this epilogue, this might be a little bit tricky to both walk and talk all across these rocks on this shore with all this gross seaweed looking stuff. We'll manage though. So anyway, yes, 5 weeks in the Southeast. Quite a time we had. I'm gonna recap it very quickly. This was a very long trip, so forgive me if I seem like I'm rushing through it. That is your job as the viewer. Watch all the things so you can keep track of it. I'm just gonna do a quick recap. So we started in the middle of April. We went south to Annapolis, the capital of Maryland. We then went to Washington, D.C. for a couple days, got the gist of everything cultural. Oh, jeez. That seaweed is slippery. This is gonna be quite difficult, but yeah, Washington, D.C., we got the whole gist of everything cultural, political about the place. We went down past Virginia. We went to enough of Virginia in the past, so I figured save some time, go straight to North Carolina. We saw the Outer Banks, coastal North Carolina. At that First Flight Memorial, we then went inland to Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina, in the Piedmont area, straight into South Carolina. We were very productive in this state. We saw Congaree National Park, our first national park of this Southeast tour, the first of 3. We saw the beautiful swamp area, and I love swamps. It's beginning to be one of my favorite biomes in the world. I love swamps, so seeing Congaree, that was great. And as we progressed through the South, we got to see a lot more of that swampland, lowland environment. But anyway, we went close by to Columbia, the capital of South Carolina, then went to the coast. We saw Charleston, a very historic and influential city in American culture. I guess you could call it like the capital of the Old South in a way. Lots of stuff happened there. We saw Fort Sumter, and that was the starting point of the Civil War. We went through the lowlands of Georgia, Savannah, then Brunswick, 2 very beautiful, quaint little southern towns along Georgia's coast. We went into Florida, and not that type of Florida, not the one you're thinking of. We went to more of the lesser known or lesser visited parts of Florida. St. Augustine, the first city ever to be settled and continually inhabited to this day. We went across the Panhandle to visit Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, the Sunshine State. I'll give you a hint, it wasn't so sunny as I expected it to be, you know, being the capital of the Sunshine State. But whatever, I digress. We went close by, right along the shore, to Apalachicola, a small little Floridian town full of Gulf-side charm, I would say. And we finally got to see the actual Gulf of Mexico. Drove by Alabama. We stopped there for one day and saw Mobile. I guess you would call this like the cultural capital of southern coastal Alabama, and a lot like New Orleans, more like the family-friendly New Orleans. We drove through the coast of Mississippi. We do eventually get to Mississippi, but not quite yet. We went into Louisiana, and we saw Baton Rouge, the capital of this beautiful Pelican state. But then we went into Cajun country and celebrated everything Cajun with this Bro Bridge Crawfish Festival. Lots of stuff happened there. Wonderful, cool day there, and I wish I could go back to Cajun country someday. I know, I have not seen all of Cajun country in Louisiana. We went up to Mississippi. Oh geez, this is very, very slippery. This might have been the wrong location to do the epilogue, but whatever. Mississippi! Natchez, Jackson, Vicksburg, all of these culturally significant Mississippi cities for such an underrated and under-traveled state like Mississippi. We sure made the most of our time there and saw what Mississippi had to offer. And then we went into Arkansas, the natural state, and saw everything that there is to see in Hot Springs, what I consider one of the weirdest national parks, but also one of the oldest federally protected areas in America, near the Ouachita Mountains. I guess that was where we saw the first mountains in a while on this trip. You don't really see, aside from Appalachia, much mountainous countryside in the south, but we did see a lot of it in Arkansas. So that was Hot Springs, then we went up to Little Rock, the capital, historical, cultural epicenter of Arkansas, and finally we finished off our grand, long southeast tour in Kentucky. A familiar state, but we went a little bit westward than we previously had before, and we saw Mammoth Cave National Park. We went into the longest cave system in the world. What a beautiful time that was. Amazing experiences altogether over those several weeks. So, in addition, I don't just travel to places and have a good time and that's it. I always try to learn something about myself or about culture or about the world in general. I like to try to learn and take with me experiences that I have and lessons that I learn so that I can become a lot better of a person myself and maybe share a bit of my own little humble insight with you all. Hold on, I'm gonna go inland a little bit, see if it's less slippery than right next to the water. It's a little bit uphill. I don't even think that's a hill, but further inland. Is that any better? I don't know, time will tell. No turning back now. But anyway, yes, what did we learn on this long southeast tour? Well, it took me a while to figure this out because I was thinking, oh, are there other lessons that I learned through this experience? But I think after dwelling in my head quite a bit towards the final stretch of that trip, everything all came together naturally, as if this was the lesson that I was meant to learn on this trip. And that lesson is, there needs to be a healthy balance between work and pleasure. And of course, I'll explain, I'll elaborate, but keep that in mind through this whole video. There is a balance that needs to be met on your travels, not only your travels, if you want to go on travels, but also in general life. The best thing to do is have that healthy balance of a little work, but also a little pleasure. I think it goes without saying that without the other, one is not going to cut it out for you. If you have too much pleasure in life, at first things are blissful. You can do whatever you want, have as much pleasure as you desire. But eventually, nothing gets done in life, and for me, you start to not feel productive. And that puts a strain on your overall confidence in your ability to do things, or just your overall satisfaction with how life is. But at the same time, if you're working non-stop every single day without a time to rest or a time to indulge on the sweeter things in life, well, what's the point of living? You're always miserable. I'm going to preface my little whole story about how that relates to this trip with that little idea. So now that you have that little perspective of mine, my personal take on that, let me tie it into this whole trip experience. You see, starting this whole grand trip, I came into this new year of 2022 with a lot more money. Quite a significant amount more than last year. So naturally, I felt like I could maybe splurge a little starting out. I didn't budget as well as I maybe should have, but that was due to my own sense of hubris about, well, I got plenty of money. And although maybe some of you who have watched Epilogue number 6 had me saying, well, money isn't everything. And to this day, I still agree with that. But at the beginning of this trip, I was feeling a little good, a little confident in my ability to spend just the amount of money I wanted to, so I had a little bit of flexibility. So throughout the first half of this trip, I would say, I was feeling pretty good about my budgeting concerns. You know, I always felt, oh, I could spend a little here, spend a little there. It's gonna be no problem. I have plenty of money to spend throughout this year. But that came at a price though, because in a way I was becoming more and more weak. I was more dependent on every time I stopped for some gas, I'll just buy something sweet at the convenience store. Or, you know, I could spend a few minutes really searching meticulously for a nice parking spot, but oh, I could just play it safe by going into like a big parking garage with only a 1-minute walk to my first destination. And it took away a lot of the vigor and the power I felt by working hard throughout last year's travels. Whereas, you know, this year, the first couple weeks were quite a breeze actually, which now in retrospect I feel isn't the greatest thing because it doesn't prepare me for this mindset of, okay, here we are grinding through these travels. We're gonna be productive. We're gonna try to find all the ways to make the most of the day. And due to that, I gradually, over the days, developed these habits that weren't really healthy for the optimal amount of satisfaction I wanted with my travel experience. You know, I would eat more than I would need if I didn't feel hungry but still wanted to indulge in all of the nice southern food that came my way. You know, I was gonna take it. I was gonna indulge myself, and those experiences of trying new foods and stuff were nice, but it was too much pleasure and not enough work for it. And that's when I felt, you know, this feels more like a vacation than an adventure, which caused me to feel like these travels lost the sense of special significance that last year's travels had, when I was really scraping by on whatever finances I had, or I was really going out of my way to make it an adventure. I was getting weak with all the pleasure that I had at my disposal. Oh man, what a beautiful sight. Well, that's a bunch of seaweed, but overall you can see this is just such a picturesque view of where we are. Let me tell you, although this trip I'm going on right now is pretty short, there's a lot of rewarding experiences on the few places I've been to so far. So yeah, trip number 8, not a long one like the previous ones, but it sure will be nice. Aside from the other examples of me choosing indulgence over hard work on this trip, you know, having the tendency to spend things on less importance, it brings up the example of when I was in Hot Springs. And sure, that national park is known for its bathhouses and its history of being a resort in the mountains, and it's got that significance. So that was the reason I chose to have, before that video, a nice bathhouse and spa experience. And although it was interesting, it was my first sort of spa experience, it didn't feel as rewarding as it should be. I mean, you go to these resort places to relax, to have a nice, soothing time with a massage or a nice bath or whatever, but it didn't feel right. There was just something off. And only later that day did it click. This is just not meant for me. I am not meant to take in and absorb all this pleasure. It's just not for me. I would rather go home to that campground after an exhausting day of walking and talking and feeling productive with the day, rather than just to spend 2.5 hours doing nothing. It kind of felt like a waste of time and money. And sure, in a material world, that would be great, but I don't want to have this type of life where I just take in everything from a material point of view. I want there to be a greater significance to these adventures I'm going on, rather than, oh, I'm just having a good time. I'm just living my best life. This could be me thinking too in-depth or too philosophically, but I've always desired my experiences to have a greater purpose, a greater meaning to it. I'm making all these videos not just for me to say, oh, look at me, I've been all these different places, but it's for me to share with you all, look at the beauty of this world. Look at everything that this world has to offer, and I want to share my experiences with you. If I was just selfishly inclined, to have a fun time visiting all these 50 states, there would be no point in capturing this. I'm doing this, in my opinion, for a greater purpose. I don't know exactly what that greater purpose is, but me filming and documenting the experiences we go on and the reflections I have and the things I learn, this is my way of trying to manifest a hopefully greater purpose. At the same time though, I am totally aware this I would consider work, capturing and documenting all the cultural beauty of this world. It's not worth it if I'm not enjoying it a little bit. That goes for any one of you who may be deciding, what do I want to do? Or what is my greater purpose? That's kind of the idea. That's why I'm not doing this whole college university thing just to appease others. I wouldn't be enjoying that. It would just be 100% work and 0% enjoyment or fulfillment. There's no pleasure to it. I don't want to end up getting some accounting job or become some insurance salesman or something like that where that's just not catered to me. But at the same time, I applaud anyone who would love nothing more in life to be an insurance adjuster or an accountant or something that I would personally not enjoy doing. If you get pleasure out of that, then good for you. You are enjoying your life. But at the same time, there is a sense of work to it, creating that balance. So ultimately, that is what I take with me on this first trip of 2022, the Southeast Tour. Going forward, I intend to at least attempt a good, nice harmony between pleasure and work, because one cannot live without the other. Now, I don't know if there were any examples of people I met on the road or at campgrounds that truly directly relate to this main theme I'm trying to convey, but just for the sake of the fun of it, let me tell you some of my fun campground experiences or off-camera experiences that I had that I wish I could have on camera. Actually, maybe not, but are fun to just tell you some nice stories for this epilogue. So first off, let me tell you about when I was in Charleston, or at least the campground off 20 minutes from Charleston. One morning, I was gonna go to the bathroom, the restroom, the place where everybody does their business, of course, naturally. And as anyone would at a campground, you lock the door. Something about this door was off though. You had to sort of struggle to get it in. And after I was ready to head out into the outside world once again to continue the morning, I noticed the door was stuck. So as you can see, my dilemma was, there was nobody really in sight. I didn't want to go through the embarrassment of calling the campground officers or whoever was in charge to say, hey, you know, I'm stuck in the bathroom, please let me out. So I took it upon myself to figure out a way out. It was locked, and it was near impossible to unlock it. That was the whole thing. So for 20 or so good minutes, I was resigned to figure out a way to get out of this locked bathroom stall. I used whatever I could, fingernails, human force, it just wouldn't budge. And so my last resort was not to call the people, but to try one last thing. Let me pull the door and then unlock the latch, unlocking the door. And somehow I was stupid not to do that first, because that's what opened the door. But that whole embarrassing struggle was for good, because later that day, a family showed up right next to me. Once again, very slippery along the coast with all the seaweed and rocks and pebbles, but a family showed up right next to me. We said hi. It was a young mother and a very young child. And this young child, he went to the same stall as me. They had the same problem too. But luckily, instead of feeling trapped or feeling in a perilous moment, I was able to just say, hey. I walked up and said, hey, you gotta pull open before you unlock it. So that saved them a lot of hassle, and sometimes it's nice to feel like you were there to help at just the right time. Sometimes you have to be in the wrong place at the wrong time to make sure others are at the right place at the right time. So it was nice to help fellow people in need at a dire time like that. That was one example of something I take with me. Through the whole duration of this Southeast trip, I was ecstatic about all the opportunities to see the friendliness and hospitality of the people of the South. This region, after all, is known for the hospitality and just the good-natured charm of the people there, the friendliness, everything. But as friendly and hospitable as people were, I strangely didn't get to experience something I got to experience all the time last year in 2021. And that was like a nice, homely, rustic campfire experience. Late at night, people are making fires all across the campground, and you're lucky if you get to be invited to one of these things. It's such a a warm and welcome atmosphere. And up until that point, I was in like Mississippi and thinking, sure, the people are friendly, but will I get to experience something like that? And then right at the last week, as I entered Hot Springs, Arkansas, into Little Rock, into Mammoth Cave, oh my goodness, did that come true in strides. Let me tell you, when I got to Hot Springs that first night, I met a whole family from Louisiana. There were a group of families with a Little League baseball team. There was some sort of championship event going on, and they were camping out in Hot Springs National Park. And I was just warmly welcomed into this atmosphere late at night. They had, pizza, drinks, karaoke. It was such a weird but almost natural experience that I slowly got comfortable into, and it was just a great time altogether. And later that night, I was invited just for like a one-on-one with one of the fathers, smoking some cigars, talking about, good old stuff with places to visit in the US, and that led to me meeting two young women a few years older than me, and we talked for hours about just a bunch of other stuff, just general happenings for people our age. It was interesting because that one night led to the very next campground. I was greeted in the same manner by this elderly big old family that basically they were very, very nice. They had their whole dinner set up and they warmly welcomed me into their banquet almost as family. Good old Southern down-home cooking, which then led to the next morning, a huge breakfast spread with biscuits and gravy, and it was nothing like I had experienced yet, even last year. It was just this strung-out marathon of these warm, homely experiences, talking and chatting with people from all walks of life. And that's something that you really cannot remove from a whole adventure. I say it all the time. As much of the material experiences that you do have while you're traveling, the sights you see, the food you eat, the music you listen to, the things you may want to buy, it all comes down to the people and the conversations that you have, unlike anything you can really experience. Each conversation is just so independent and individual from one another. There's just nothing that can match the sense of fulfillment you get after these awesome conversations with people. That's not to say that everything before that end week was not as great too, because I met some great people. In fact, when I was in Alabama, there was almost like a potluck dinner set up by the campground, and people from all across the campground showed up for this potluck dinner, and it was just amazing. I never went to a potluck dinner before, but I contributed, and great conversations once again, which led to the next morning a feast of sugary sweets, to say the least. Getting back to the idea of indulging, I question whether I had a little bit too much that day. And then Jackson, Mississippi, I met a guy named Slim. Shout out to Slim if you ever see this. What a great guy. He didn't have to show me around Farish Street in Jackson, but he did, and he really allowed me to get an understanding of Jackson more so than just the typical tour experience. Northern Florida, right next to Tallahassee and Apalachicola. Billy, if you see this, shout out to you. Amazing conversation with Billy. This guy, the man, the myth, the legend. If Epilogue 6 wasn't enough to share with you all that, there's no one way to live life, my conversations with this guy truly affirmed that for me. So, thank you. And to top it all off, I'd like to talk about this. Over the past few years, online mediums are a great way to connect and network with people. So over the last several years, I've been able to network with such people and become friends with people I never really would have had it not been for the internet. And this was the first trip where I actually got to connect and meet in real life one of those people with whom I developed a lot of online networks and friendships with. So I was in northern Louisiana for a few days, just taking a rest in between Mississippi and Arkansas. And this one guy, he invited me for a nice southern cookout with like hybrid deer beef burgers on the grill. I might want to show a picture of that. Amazing stuff with a bunch of potato salad, macaroni salad, and conversations for hours. So once again, amazing experiences on the road that you can't get by staying home. So yeah, shout out to a dude named Bomber for the amazing cookout session that day. I find it quite interesting how there's just a human tendency for balance. You know, if you are working yourself to death, you crave pleasure in any way, from relaxation to a nice meal. But if you have too much pleasure in your life and you just have all the luxuries, amenities that you want, you will find yourself lacking a purpose. You will want to work and strive for something greater than yourself. And so on this trip, I have found that this lesson is quite an important one to learn if we are to try and strive for success. It requires a little bit of both. There's no way we can see ourselves as people doing work if we don't enjoy it. And I think that's how we as people accomplish things and become successful. Everybody wants to be great and wants to be known for some sort of contribution. At least that's the way I see it. Everybody wants to eventually live their best life. And everybody knows that by doing nothing and only taking care of yourself, you're not gonna achieve anything. You're not going to live the life you want to live. But at the same time, how in the world are we motivated to do something if there is no sense of gratification or reward? If we see that there is no pleasure either now or in the future? If it's just work and nothing else, there's no incentive. So there needs to be that healthy balance between work and pleasure. Look at that. Another grand old trip in the books. Another valuable life lesson we can take with us. Well, I got nothing else to say unless you guys want to say something. I'm just kidding. That's not how it works. It's only one way. It's just me to you. But yeah, try to find that balance of work and pleasure. These two things are great, and they do wonders for humanity and society, but they cannot go alone. There has to be a nice unity and harmony between them. So find the balance, to the best of your ability, of course. But that's it. That's all I got. My brain is winded. I am ready to go home, take a nice nap. When I mean home, I mean the campground, because we're still doing the trip. But standing at the edge of America, looking at some foreign land over there, surrounded by seaweed and rocks and pebbles and nice cliff sides. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.